Hello, everyone, and welcome to The Death Chicks. I'm Misty Lynn, and I'm here with my wonderful co-host, Patty Burgess. And The Death Chicks are two women working to bring light to the topic of death and dying. It's something not many people talk about casually and with happiness in their hearts, and Patty and I are working to change this. Everyone is going to die. That's a reality. But what we want to do is have this fact of life become part of everyday conversation, so it's not shrouded and surrounded by the dark clouds that sometimes follow this conversation. One of the things I like to say is that death is kind of like sex was in the 50s. Everyone's doing it, but no one's talking about it. And our guest today, who's written the Amateur Guide to Death and Dying, also happens to have some experience in the area of sex as a therapist. So it's interesting that these two topics can come together, and we won't be touching on that part of it today. But we are very fortunate to have Richard Wagner here, and he's been through a very interesting life journey. Patty's going to introduce more about him now. And thank you for joining us. We're all amateurs at death. None of us have had that experience many times, which would bring us to expert status. And we hope that by joining us today and by joining our show, you'll begin to feel okay and comfortable with it. And we're going to do it. We're going to be there one day. So let's be ready. So thanks for joining us, and over to you, Patty.
Thanks, Misty, so much. Hey, we are so thrilled to have our guest today, Dr. Richard Wagner. And, you know, I love the title of his book because the amateurs, when I saw that title, I just really did chuckle, kind of like, do I want to get good at this? So should I read this? And if I want to get good at this, and then I realized, you know what, when you put it in the context of what we're talking about all the time, and that is, we have a choice, I think, to whatever degree we have, assuming it's not a sudden death or a tragic death. You know, if we've got a long enough trajectory between illness and death, maybe we can sort of design our death and make it a good one. So yes is the answer to reading that book, Amateur's Guide to Death and Dying, because I want to get good at this. I mean, I don't want to go and come back and go and come back. That would maybe get a little boring, but I do want to get good at what this is going to mean for us personally and kind of humanity, because we're all going to do it. So we do have Richard, and Richard, hang in there. I'm going to give you a proper introduction, and we are going to chat you up. Okay, you ready?
I am.
Good, good, good. All right, so Richard Wagner is a Ph.D. He's a psychotherapist in private practice in Seattle, Washington, and he's got over 30 years' experience working with the terminally ill, chronically ill, elders, and dying people in hospitals, hospices, and home settings. And he also facilitates support groups for care providers as well as healing and helping professionals. Very, very important, because they, too, grieve the loss of the patients they're working with. So he also provides grief counseling for survivors, both individually and in group settings, and he's the founder of Paradigm, Enhancing Life Near Death, which is a cutting-edge, health-related nonprofit organization. Dr. Wagner was also awarded the prestigious University of California, San Francisco Chancellor's Award for Public Service in '99 for this very work. And he's also the author of Longfellow and the Deep Hidden Woods, which is a critically acclaimed children's book that touches on these topics of death, dying, and bereavement. And I don't think it's too early to start, you know, introducing these concepts in a very gentle, comfortable way to children. So as we were chatting, we learned, you know, that Dr. Wagner has had an interesting journey getting to this field of death and dying. He first went into the seminary, then graduated from college and was a Catholic priest for 20 years. And the next thing you know, he's on our show, and all of his life has now led up to this moment.
I feel so blessed.
I'm telling you, you never know how it's going to end up. Look, you're here.
Is this the end? Oh, no!
This is the end. This is what it leads to, the death chicks.
So that makes me a death dude, right?
That makes you a death dude.
Oh, that sounds good.
We love it. So, Richard, tell us, you know, when we were talking beforehand in the green room, you shared with us a little bit about your journey and that it was, in your words, brutal and things have changed. And for you, that is now that you're in this world. But it seems like that's how this idea of getting in touch with death and dying happened for you. And if you could share a little bit about that with us, we would be gifted by that, I really believe.
Good. Thank you very much. And thank you for this invitation to be with you.
Sure.
As we both agree, as we all agree, I should say, this is a hard sell for our culture. Conscious dying is not necessarily something that we do with ease. But once we get the hang of it, even as amateurs, it seems to me that our living our life, the good life, is so much easier and so much more beneficial. As you say, I came to the work of death and dying in a rather unorthodox sort of way. You mentioned that I was a Catholic priest. I was ordained in 1975 in Oakland, California. And it was a wonderful thing. It was my calling since I was a little boy. And I wanted to do, interestingly enough, work with sexual minorities. And so my religious community, the Oblates of Mary Immaculate, sent me to school to get a degree, a Ph.D. degree. And this one happens to be in clinical sexology, if you can believe it. In fact, I'm the only Catholic priest in the world with such a degree. But anyhow.
See, it all led to this.
There you go. There you go. And so here I am, all ready to begin this new ministry. It will be new to me and new to the church. And I wrote my doctoral thesis about the sexual attitudes and behaviors of gay Catholic priests in the active ministry back in 1981, and that blew me out of the water. That was the end of my priesthood, practically. At the same time, 1981, I was living in San Francisco. 1981 began AIDS.
Yes.
And even before it had a name. And my friends, most of my friends died in the first wave from 81 to 85. And those of us who were surviving were just completely perplexed by the whole thing. We didn't know what to do, how to do it, what should we do next. Was life even worth living? Curiously enough,
blueprint then. There was no blueprint.
Absolutely.
I remember this time, and some friends of mine who were going through the grief and the unknowing of what was happening. There was no one knew. No one knew.
Tragic. Anyhow, so my friends started to look toward me, and they said, "Well, you have a background in theology, you have a background in therapy and psychology, so you go and find out what the problem is, and then you let us know." Well, this was the worst assignment for me because I had the worst bedside manner ever. Sick people, just made my flesh crawl. If I saw blood, I would nearly faint. But here I was, thrown into this crucible, and I thought, well, good Lord, how am I going to ever survive this? And I had nothing to say. There was nothing in my seminary training or my training as a priest to prepare me for what I saw was people dying left and right, 3, 4 a day. It was astonishing. I was completely unprepared. And so the only thing I knew how to do was to sit and be present, sit and be quiet. And that actually was the best thing. And that's how I learned. I began to learn that death, like St. Francis called her, Sister Death, means us no harm. It's an opportunity for us to come to grips with who we are and what we've become and what we need to become in order for us to be the best people that we can be. So death became something less traumatic and less devastating and more of an invitation to find out who we are. And I ran with that. I decided, well, this is a wonderful thing, okay? And I noticed that I would go from one death scene to the next, and each and every person that I was present to was trying to create this thing, this awareness, in a vacuum. like no one else had ever died before them. And so I thought to myself, well, where is all the wisdom that we come to in the dying process? Where does that all go? It
Wow.
unfortunately dies with us. And so I said, we got to stop that. We got to create some kind of vehicle where we are able to collect this wisdom and bring it to those who survive us.
Wow. Wow.
Wow.
So that was
That is
your
profound.
calling. What was that? Oh, go ahead, miss. I'm sorry.
I was just going to say that that was brilliant. You know, it's pioneering, it's insightful. You were, you know, showed down by the powers that be, and here you were called by your friends and the people around you to step into an area you did not want to go in. You weren't comfortable, yet you went there. And that's kind of what the death chicks are calling people to do, is to find their courage and to step into this arena that we don't like to talk about. And this, we believe, is where we're able to kind of come alive somehow. It's like embracing that which we fear lights us up and brings a spark to our life that we may have never felt before. It's a new spark. So it can light us up. So walking into your fears
I
is
totally
a great
agree.
thing.
I totally agree. And, you know, I was altered by the experience. It was a painful experience because, you know, I, like everybody else, was not only afraid of my own personal demise, but I was sad over the demise of those people that I cared for. And but it awakened in me the possibility that, you know, if I'm present, if I allow the person who is dying to give me the gifts that they want to give me, then I am totally enriched for the rest of my life.
Absolutely. And when you mentioned being present, is that how it affected you personally, or I keep picturing when you mentioned 3 or 4 a day, they may not have been 3 or 4 of your own friends, or maybe they were a day, but that is a lot of loss in a very short period of time, and I don't know how a body or a system even handles that. And you say, is that how you learned to be present, because there was no other choice?
Well, there wasn't really a choice. It was either, you know, just absent oneself completely, or, you know, be present. And I mean, you know, and when you are present, you can either fight it
Yeah.
and, you know, deny it and reject it and fight against it, or you can let it embrace you. And I decided, you know, it was too much energy to go and try to fight something that was universal and was going to happen anyhow. I mean, I had no effective way of curing anyone. So I decided, well, maybe if this is so universal and so present in the human condition, maybe there's something there that we should pay attention to, or I should pay attention to, and that was it. And that
Nice.
a good death is also a good life. You said, Patty, in your introduction to me that, unless somebody it doesn't die swiftly or tragically or accidentally, but has the grace of, you know, dying slowly, then you can address, you know, your mortality. But I kind of disagree with that. I think that all of us, each and every one of us who draws breath right now, has an opportunity to face our mortality. And if we do it, well, it's not crunch time. If we're, you know, if we do it when it's not, you know, if we study before the test, then the night before the test, it's relatively easy to deal with.
Can you cram for this test? Can you cram?
Well,
You know
lots
what,
of
I
people
do
think
have
that they should.
Because if you can, I'm like the procrastinator enough that might wait. But I don't think I'm waiting. But I do have a question about that, and I don't know if we really disagree, because I even believe that people, we just may not get to see it. I even believe people who have left this earth, what appears to be swiftly to us, there's a whole thing going on that we're not privy to, perhaps, number one.
Yes, right.
But also, how is it that would you, since we're on that topic, how is it that you would invite, because I love that, invite people, you use that word, to examine this when everything in their being and everything in most of our culture, I think that's what Misty and I are like trying to get to the nugget of. Like if we could find that secret, then we'd be sort of out of a show because it would be boring then. Everybody'd be doing it. So you wait a little bit, cram the night before for that one so we can still hang out here. But no, what is that would get somebody, would invite them to look at it? Is it an experience themselves? Is that what we see one by one happening? Because it's starting to build, I think.
Well, the thing is that if you look at life in general, it's a constant series of goodbyes and endings. Our youth ends, our beauty ends, not mine, of course.
Not mine.
But all of that comes to an end. Hair goes away. And we're having to say goodbye. And the curious thing is that a lot of people don't know how to say goodbye, don't know how to gracefully let go. Either to youth, you see, senior people dressing like children. You see people, wearing wigs and hairpieces when their hair is gone. It's a sign to me that we don't know how to gracefully acknowledge when things end, and that is a problem. That is a terrible problem. Relationships end.
I guess I'm going to say
jobs end.
Oh, I'm sorry.
All
I guess
these
I'm going to
things.
say goodbye to my stretch pants then. Gracefully let go.
Right. Just let it go. Just let it go.
But
Or
Patty,
wear them
those
with
are
pride
the
and say,
best.
right.
Oh, God.
I have a leg because I live in the Arctic. So I let go of a lot moving up here. And Patty, I would hang on to those stretch pants because those are comfy. And when you get older, you can feel your bones. The chair is harder. And if you have jeans with, like, big pockets, I can't wear those anymore because they hurt my butt when I sit on hard chairs.
I know, but I don't want to go out in public with my stretch pants. But that's a whole nother show. We're talking about that.
Well, the point is...
Richard, you have some really great points.
Yeah,
the point is that...
Yeah, it's true. Very true. Go on.
If we learn how to say goodbye to things and acknowledge the end of things when it happens, relationships, our sight, our hair, whatever it is, if we can gradually understand and say goodbye and say thank you, when it comes to our own personal demise, it seems to me that we're going to have so much more success in being able to be that for the people who survive us, to give them, the people who survive us, blessings to get on with the rest of their life, ask for blessings from them to get on with the task of dying ourselves. And you'll be surprised, maybe you're not surprised, but a lot of people in our audience might be surprised at how unavailable those blessings are to people who are sick and dying. That people say, no, you can't talk like that, you can't think like that, yes. You're going to all outlive us all, oh mom, oh dad, don't. That's a terrible thing. Just let them speak their mind. If they have something to say to us, then let them speak. And let them give their gifts to us, and we give our gifts to them. And understand that we're not saving them from anything. This is a natural process that each and every one of us has to face.
So true.
You want to go, Patty? I was just going to say, I love what you said about practicing. If we live our lives fearing and hanging on to things that are ready to let go, be it our hair or our stretchies, when it comes time for us to let go of this thing we call life, it's going to be hard. However, if we start practicing now and just take things as they come, when it's time for them to go, be okay with it, stop hanging on to things as it is, because really the only thing that we can count on in this life is change, then when the change for us to change from living in this physical body to being perhaps only a spirit will be much easier. And I'm wondering, what brought you? Oh, what brought you to write your book? And tell us a little bit about your book, and how does that fit into this picture?
Well, back to the AIDS crisis, as I said, people were dying, and the wisdom that they came to at the end of their life died with them. I thought that was tragic. So I started this nonprofit organization called Paradigm Enhancing Life Near Death, and one of the programs that we did was called the Access Program, and this was the way that people were introduced to Paradigm and our philosophy about life and death, and that was that sick, elder, and dying people need to be holistically enabled to make all the choices they make. And we believed that that wasn't possible unless they had all the information that they needed to make up their mind. So in terms of legal concerns and spiritual concerns and intimacy concerns and what happens in final stages with your body and the topic of assisted dying, all of those things were addressed. We took no advocacy position on any of those things except that we thought that people should have adequate information to make up their own mind. So we built this program, this Access program. It was 10 weeks, and it was a group process, and generally 8 or 10 people in a group. And there was exercises, there was homework, there was sharing, there was, and interestingly enough, it had nothing to do with a disease process. So, and in those days, people would say, oh, you know, I have AIDS, and, you know, what do I have to, you know, share with somebody who had cancer? Or somebody with cancer said, what do I have to say with, you know, somebody with heart disease? I said, it isn't about disease. It's about mortality, and that is the great equalizer. That is the thing that holds us all together. So I said, let's pull together and see if we can come up with a way to address our mortality. And so I put together this program, this 10-week program, and in the 10 weeks there were 5 presentations by people who came in and spoke to us about information, legal concerns, what paperwork you need to have in order to, you know, relax about the end of your life in terms of wills as well as paperwork dealing with, you know, who's going to be making medical decisions and legal decisions for you if you were unable to make those yourself. We had a minister come in and talk to us about spiritual concerns, how to get clean with God. If you have, whatever God means, or you're divine in your life, how to get clean with God if you need to. Intimacy concerns, we had a sexologist come in and speak to us about what does it mean, you know, if I don't know how to be touched or touch the person who I've loved all of my life, and what do I do with that? And how do I express, you know, my love to somebody who is actively dying? Final stages, a doctor would come in and speak to us and, you know, be very frank about what happens as one's body closes down, so that there's no mystery. I mean, doctors know all of this, nurses know all of this, but those of us who are in the process of dying, we don't know, and we're afraid. And we're afraid because we don't know. But if you know, that a lot of the fear goes out of it. And finally, we addressed the question of assisted dying, a very hot button issue in our culture. And but again, I thought we would do our participants a disservice if they didn't have this opportunity to think about it. And when this program was such a success, I decided to create a workbook form of it, The Amateur's Guide to Death and Dying. And this is the workshop in workbook form. So when you buy the book and you start the book, you're immediately plugged into an on-the-page support group. A 10-person on-the-page support group, because you're never alone. You won't ever be alone. People will be right there with you, doing the same exercises as you, doing the same homework as you, addressing the same topics as you. And when you finish this book, you will have a resource that you could pass on to anyone, anyone who might survive you, as a way of knowing what your mindset is in terms of really pivotal questions about life and death.
Wow.
I love that, and I just have to ask, who, when you wrote that, who was your target audience? Was it, you know, someone my age? Was it someone who's been diagnosed with death? Was it someone, who's your target audience? Who is this book for?
Well, most of the people who participated in the paradigm programs were experiencing a disease process of one sort or another. Some of them were actively dying, but not everyone. I mean, there were doctors and there were nurses, and there was one guy who was mugged in New York, a young man in his 30s. He was in Central Park in New York, probably at the wrong time, at the wrong place at the wrong time, and he was mugged, and the perpetrator held a gun to his head, and he said, "I'm going to pull the trigger." And this guy, I don't know where this came from, he said he didn't know either. He said, "Well, okay, go ahead and pull the trigger." He says, "Because I have inoperable brain cancer."
Did he?
No, he didn't. He just made that up. And the mugger ran away. Because
wow.
he was afraid of death or cheating. I don't know what it was. Well, this was this man's personal experience with, you know, confronting his mortality. I mean, he was seconds away from actually dying. And that changed his entire life. There was another person who survived an airplane crash. And, you know, like, what do you do with that?
Wow.
When you have such a close brush with death, what do you do with it? You can't really talk to the people around you. You have to talk to people who are already facing their mortality.
That's right. That's right. Wow.
So the book is for anybody who's drawing breath. I think it's humorous, it's interactive, it invites you to demythologize this thing that we are often so afraid of.
Tell us about the on-page support people to give a little bit more information about how that works.
Okay, so there's 10 people, and so you, as the reader, will be the 11th person. And all of the people will introduce themselves, just like if you were ever in a group process. And they tell you a little bit about themselves. There's 5 men and 5 women. And they range in age from 18 to 80. And you know, they're charming and they're very interesting, and over the 10 weeks they disclose themselves to you, and their own personal pains, their own fears, early messages about death, who they are, how they got to be this way, what they need to work on. And the strengths of some of the people in the group are, you know, complementary to the weaknesses of others, and vice versa. And so it's a really wonderful sort of thing. You get to really identify with these people. They become friends of yours. It's hard not to. When you face something as poignant as your own mortality in the presence of somebody else, these people become very close. And I've heard from many people who have read the book and said, "What happened to this person and what happened to that person?"
Now, are they made up, or are they a combination of what you all experienced in the group?
They're a combination of personality. They are based on real people, and I won't give anything away. But and it's in a way it's sort of like reading a novel, because these characters unfold and you learn so much about them and you become so close to them that it's absolutely a beautiful experience.
It is so creative, Richard. Very, very creative. And you know, it's such an interesting concept, because I think many people might even avoid support groups because of whatever, a fear of being with somebody, or not feeling like anybody would understand, which I find interesting, because grief and death, it is a great leveler or equalizer. But this gives somebody an opportunity to kind of practice coming out of their shell.
Exactly.
So if you're afraid of support groups but feel like going to one and don't have the courage to get there, read Richard's book. And this is the primer. This is the support group primer, so
It
you'll
is.
really feel
It's just
that you're
the
a part
beginning.
of it. And with every chapter, you'll get to know them more, and just as with all people that we come together with in our lives, as you get to know them better, there becomes more of a comfort level. So I think it's a great primer for people who haven't been to a support group and who want to go there. And then I guess the other thing, we're coming up to a half hour, which is our new format for our show. But Richard, what is the biggest thing that you want people to take home from this book? What will they walk away from if they read it?
Well, you will have some confidence that come what may, either swiftly or over the long haul, that you will be able to enjoy your life to the fullest, and that you will be in charge as much as possible in the decision making about how, particularly at the end of your life will go. And you will be able to get pointers on how to interact with those people who survive you, even the ones who are not helpful at the end of your life, how to deal with them, and make the best of a difficult situation.
That's great, because we often talk about how to say peaceful goodbyes, but not too many people talk about what to do with those people that you just don't really like, or that annoy you, or whatever. Maybe there's some water under the bridge that hasn't been flushed through yet. They're still hanging on. So that's great that you touch on that, and how to deal with those difficult situations, because I think that might be one of the hardest things for people letting go, is when they have unresolved stuff. So if your book touches on that is super. And if we can clear and release and forgive before we go, if we do our homework before the test, it's going to be so much easier.
And for cram. And it's interesting you talk about all this, because the embodiment of this happened to me at the bedside of my friend Rona, as she was in the last hours of her dying. Her family was still asking her to hold on, and I wonder if this is also if this has any assistance for people who are left behind. I guess they should be doing this themselves, because maybe they can begin to gracefully say goodbye, because there was no grace there, and it was tragic to watch.
I think The Amateur's Guide to Death and Dying is perfectly situated and applicable to the life of anybody who is grieving the death of somebody that they care for. Because one of the reasons that we grieve so difficultly for in our time and our culture is because we, haven't come to grips with our own mortality.
Right.
And if we understand, the mindset of somebody who is dying, we would never, ever presume to say, "Oh no, stay." We would never be that selfish if we profess that we absolutely love this person.
Right.
This is true.
Yeah, and that's why it becomes sometimes when people, the well-intentioned,
absolutely
think it's really doing for them, but it's really about the person. It really is about the person staying here, that they cannot manage this, and that's our job as humans, to start to manage that, because everything is a goodbye. Everything is a goodbye.
Right.
Endless goodbye.
Yeah, and it's our selfish reasons that to stay. Yeah.
Right.
So, Richard, is there anything else that you'd like to share with our audience before we go? And
I do.
Please do so. And then if you want, you can go from there right into a round of where you'd like to direct people and how you can help them further.
Good. One final thing, I want to introduce you to my second children's book. It's called Longfellow in the Deep Hidden Woods.
Yeah.
This has it's a wonderful story. Here's Longfellow.
I love the animals.
He's the most noble wiener dog in the whole world, and he has.
As opposed to the other less noble wiener dogs.
That's right. And here's his friend Henry, old Henry.
Oh.
Does Henry have any resemblance to his writer, owner, creator? Okay.
How dare you? How dare you? I knew you were going to say that. Don't go there.
He's
and here's Henry's nurse.
Well, I
Miss
don't
Ouija
know Henry's
Tuffy.
nurse. He doesn't look like you. Henry's nurse doesn't.
Anyhow, it's beautifully illustrated, as you can see. It's a wonderful story, and it has a death and bereavement theme to it. I'm not going to give you away to the end, but one of the things that I've discovered, I mean, in most of my work, I deal with adults, but children also have great questions about life and death, particularly if it comes crashing into their life with the death of somebody, an adult, a human that they know, a parent, grandparent, a relative of some sort, or a pet, and they don't know what to make of it. And we prohibit them from thinking about the end of life, even though it's all around us. You know, we're just almost to embark on the fall, and the world, at least in the northern hemisphere, is going to be closing down. It is going to be dying for the most part. And so all of nature, all of the world is a signal to us of this great round of life and death. And children are placed in it. So why not give them an opportunity to rehearse, to think about this thing before it comes crashing into their life? And it's a wonderful story. The interesting thing is that most of the adults that have read the story think that it's actually a story for adults as opposed to children. But honestly, I read it for kids because I think they deserve the same kind of opportunities that we adults have to address life's difficult things.
And maybe we
Wonderfully
can...
said.
Beautifully. And maybe we can bring up a generation, the next generation, with this kind of information where
Absolutely.
Kids are comfortable with this and that they have a context for it versus being so strange.
Right.
Wonderful.
Right.
And you know what's interesting is I have a little one. I have my little girl's 6, and Patty, when you say we bring up children so they're not afraid of it, what I've learned from my little one is that she's not afraid of it. She just said, "Oh, she died." I said, "Oh, you know, so passed on," or you know, use some nice term. "Oh, she died." You know, they just say it, and it's
so
like
literal,
they know.
yeah.
And I honestly think that we create the fears in them by when they ask us the
Absolutely.
questions, we pussyfoot around it, and we use all these terms, and just don't talk about it frankly, like we're having meat and potatoes for dinner. Well,
Right.
well, Aunt Bessie, she smoked and drank all her life, and that's why she died at 62.
Right.
You know? Or whatever it is, but kids get this, and they appreciate it. And I think it's only when we as adults, you know, try to hide and protect them from it, that they grow up feeling that they also have to hide and protect it, and they grow up with this fear around it. Because I think we create the fears in our children.
Right. We
Thanks
pass
for
them
bringing that
on from
up. Great
generation
point.
to generation. Absolutely. And, you know, if we can break that cycle, all of us, and, you know, I'm really big on avoiding euphemisms when we talk about death and dying. I do that, you know, you mentioned at the beginning of the show that I work with a lot of people who are grieving, and most of them, I ask them to begin by telling me their story. Well, I lost my husband or I lost my wife, and my question is always, where? At the mall? And you know, they're taken aback, you know, and they're shocked by my words, and I want to shock them. I want to. I want to say, stop using vocabulary that makes you look like the bad guy. Okay? When I say I lost my keys or I lost my hat, that's just my fault. I did that. Something went wrong, and this terrible thing happened. My keys or hat or phone or wherever. But when somebody dies, I didn't lose them. I have a sense of loss, perhaps, about them, but that wasn't my personal failing. Or when people write in, you know, in obituaries, he lost or she lost her battle with cancer.
Yeah.
In America, that just doesn't cut it. We don't want to be a loser. We can't be a loser. And so if it's all set up in this fashion where, you know, no matter what we do, we fight or we don't fight, and we're still going to lose, well, there's something wrong with that. That sucks. That's a terrible way to go out. And a lot of people who are actively dying, you know, say to me, like, don't let anyone say that about me. I will come back and haunt them because that's a terrible thing. I didn't lose my battle. This is a natural progression of something alive to something being dead, and that's as simple as that.
That's beautiful.
I love it. Well, we should, and there's all these euphemisms we use that are really disempowering, and I think it's time, and maybe you and I and Patty and whoever else is watching, but can chime in and start changing these words. Maybe we can throw out some new ones and ways to talk about it. Anyhow, nothing's coming to mind right now, but it's so important, and it's
there's a whole
it's
chapter
not fair to these people.
What's that?
There's a whole chapter in the Amateur's Guide. One of the at-home exercises is to ask friends and relatives what are the euphemisms that you use about death and dying. Circling the drain, ontologically challenged, pushing up daisies. There's millions of them. And in the book, the participants, as well as the person who is reading the book, bring their list. And we have a really good time putting together this master list of euphemisms about death and dying. It's really wonderful.
Oh, that's great. We really should. And, you know, like the battling cancer part, I have always felt uncomfortable with that because the truth is you're already so freaking exhausted from, you know, whatever the illness is. Now you're going to go, like, do battle with it? I'm like,
Right.
you know, like, that's why I'm pretty comfortable with it. Just like, no, I don't think so. I think I'll be like the guy in the park. Hey, I got brain cancer. Go ahead, shoot me. You know?
Really? I mean, it's not something that you do.
If you're comfortable with death. I mean, if you're not comfortable, now I'm not saying he was comfortable with being, like, certainly that's not my chosen way, but if it happens, you know, like, that's his life. But the anxiety and the pharmaceuticals that are poured into us because of our anxieties like that are just astounding. So.
Right.
So
and
good.
Patty has a freebie on her website. I think it's like 136, I don't know, 100 and something ways that we talk about death, and then it's kind of in line with what's in your book. So we'll have to make sure that we get all those ones in Richard's book onto your list, Patty. It's great. It's fun, and we can change it. We can change the way we talk. It's happened all over the world.
And that's the beginning. That, you know, in all therapy, you know, if it's sex therapy, relationship therapy, death and dying, grief, it's changing vocabulary is what is going to change the way that we look at things. And if I'm using the same old vocabulary that I learned when I was a little boy, to either address my God or, you know, address my life partner or address my medical life, my children, you know, it's time to grow up. It's trying to learn new vocabulary to talk about things that is not going to trap us into old ways of thinking about ourselves.
Right. It's the reframe, which is what I like to do at Teaching Transitions and Doing Death Differently. It's what Misty is doing with Bittersweet Blessing.
Absolutely.
Just even the sweet part of her website is the part that people think can't exist there. It's those two different things that seem opposed that are really not, and that actually can give such great richness to each other. That is this death and grief, but you think it can't. Like, we had somebody on who was who was a jollytologist, that death and humor couldn't live side by side. So we love that concept. We do. You know what? What I think we ought to do is start to go around, Richard, and what we'll end up with is you to tell us where where people can get your guide, where people can get in touch with you. But what we like to do at the end is kind of go around and say what's up for each other and what's happening, and then we'll probably sign up. This has been fantastic. We could keep on going. I feel like we ought to do like Oprah after the show or something, you know, and then.
Alrighty.
But it might be like, I don't know. It might have euphemisms in there. So.
And just before you jump in there, Richard, I do want to give a quick shout out to our guest, Julie Sager. And we love Julie and her work. She wrote a great book.
She is an honorary death chick. She needs to come on with us sometime.
I think so. I think so too. Mary Grace, thank you so much for joining us again.
Mary Grace.
Neil Brown. Neil Brown looks like he might be a new fella, but thanks everyone for joining us live. Mark and Heidi are always there cheering for us and there for technical support too. So thanks everyone, and if you're watching this in the afterlife, no, in the after show, please pass on with your friends. So here we go, having lots of fun now. So pass it along, and let's get everyone in this boat, and let's have a party while it's going down. I'm Misty Lynn, Bittersweet Blessing. Check us out.
That sounds good.
Patty, over to you, or Richard, over to you, and we'll end up with Patty.
Actually, I wanted to end up with Richard so that he could like take us out on his where to get his book and everything. I didn't want to be the last word, although I love being the last word. So
I can tell.
That's my husband. That's it. Very good. I'm glad somebody notices the real me. So. Anyway, yes, as Misty said, go to my website, 134 ways that we talk about dying, even though we act like we don't want to talk about it, but it's in our language and it's in there in ways that Richard talked about. Might be a good idea to, kind of elevate a bit in some way. Elevate to actually the real thing versus, just kind of giving it a pass by saying someone passed on. But you can visit me at teachingtransitions.com, which is for hospices and colleges and universities, and doingdeathdifferently.com for individuals who are called to be with the dying and looking for training in that. So come visit. And Richard, to you.
Thank you for this opportunity to share with your audience. It's so important that we do this, and it's even more important that we do it with a sense of humor, I think. I am Richard Wagner. I am the author of The Amateur's Guide to Death and Dying. You can find us on Amazon, but better, visit my website, theamateursguide.com, and you can find this and my children's book, Longfellow in the Deep Hidden Woods, both in the sidebar of the site. Also, the site contains ways to get in contact with me. There's also lots and lots of articles, good general information about death and dying. I even have Hump Day humor, which involves cartoons and stuff about being sick and dying. If you want to look for this book independently, again, also on Amazon, but you can visit my publisher, which is Hush Puppy Books. You can maybe see that at the bottom there.
The most noble wiener dog alive.
There you go. It is. It says Longfellow, the bravest and noblest wiener dog in the world.
Right. Very, very good. Richard, you have been a fascinating guest, and I know there's a lot more. In fact, hang with us while we sign off for the live portion of it, and then we'll talk to you in the green room afterwards. But thank you so much for being here. It's been such a pleasure to get to know you and to share your very passionate gifts with the world. Really wonderful.
Thank you.
Good stuff. And just before we go, I want to put a quick shout out to Rachel Jordan. I'm not sure if I'm saying your name right, Rachel, but I connected with Rachel on Googling around, and I think we jive. We're in the same, talking about the same stuff. So she was able to pop on, and she's saying she loved our show. So, and she's going to share it with her friends. So thank you so much for coming, Rachel.
Yay,
and
Rachel.
It's great we connected, and maybe you can be on our show one day. Who knows? We'll keep in touch though. And thank you so much for sharing. Richard, bye for now, or bye audience. We're gonna have a little after green room party with Richard here, but we'll see you next week, Thursday, 3 o'clock Eastern on a Death Chicks.
You got it. We're also gonna have 10 people in the green room from this book. All those people you talked about.
Exactly.
All right.
There's a care party. Bye for now, everyone.